Governor Scott Walker, how are you, sir?
I am outstanding. Thanks for having me on.
Where are you now?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Isn't that a beautiful town, by the way?
It's spectacular. It's a great place. And the Citadel is going to be exciting to be at tomorrow.
And you're giving a huge foreign policy speech tomorrow. Can you give us a little hint about what's going to be in it?
Yeah, we're gonna hone in particular. This is the first of a number, not just on foreign policy, but obviously on other issues. But this is the first of a couple of different parts in foreign policy. It's really going to hone in on how do we tackle the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. And a lot of people talk about it, but they don't make the connection that it's not just ISIS. ISIS is obviously one of the radical elements of Sunni Islam, but not enough focus has been put on Iran. We talk a lot about the Iran deal, but Iran is really the concentration of a lot of the Shiite-based extremism, the radical forms of terrorism there as well. And we're going to tie the connection about what we're going to do to solve that in both how do we deal with Iran and how do we deal with ISIS in places like Iraq and Syria, and all the while do it in a way that reaffirms our allied relationship with the great country of Israel.
Let me ask you this about that part of the world. It seems like we've got things upside down. This administration has spent an enormous amount of time working with a regime that lies and cheats and kills Americans. On the other hand, with the Israeli government and Netanyahu, the relationship is very cold, and we really don't work with them. Don't you find all this quite bizarre?
Oh, it is. In fact, I had a few of the elite, if you will, in Washington mocked the fact that I've said a number of times now that I made reference to the movie the movie called Trading Places back from the 1980s, where two characters, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, traded places. And I said I often feel in watching how this administration treats Iran and how they treat Israel that it seems like the sequel to that movie. And, of course, the elite in Washington kind of mocked it. But I said it's a good way to explain to Americans about how ridiculous our treatment is of those two countries. Iran, which has not changed very much from the nation I remember as a kid that held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days, is still an oppressive regime led by a brutal leader, the supreme leader, and the de facto president that they kind of say can be the one that runs for this. And we've got Israel that's supposed to be our ally, and the kind of treatment that Benjamin Netanyahu got when he came to speak before a joint session of the Congress is the sort of thing you would expect for a country that was not connected to the United States. You'd almost think it was an adversarial relationship, at least under this administration. That has got to change. There should be no daylight between the United States and Israel. And earlier this year when I was in Israel, I met not only with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I met with Herzog and some of the other leaders to make it clear that no matter who the leader is, I like Netanyahu a lot. I think the speech he gave in Congress was a lot like Winston Churchill, but I want to make it absolutely clear that no matter who is in charge, if I'm president, there's going to be a strong relationship with Israel.
Let me ask you this. Take you on another subject here. Are you concerned that some of you folks, you in particular, are not getting enough attention from the free media, in other words, from the media out there, that they might seem to be focused on one or two candidates?
Sure, absolutely. The way we counter that, or have been thus far, is I just came into Charleston today, but I was in the last 2 days in Iowa, and it's a grind, but it's one I enjoy going out. We're doing all 99 counties, for example, in the state of Iowa. We're doing all the counties in New Hampshire. We're going around yet again. This is the third time in the last 2 weeks we've been in South Carolina. It doesn't get the live cut-ins on some of the, on CNN as they had the other day with one of the other candidates for nearly an hour. But in the end, I think a lot of these early state voters, they pay very, very close attention to all the candidates, and they're not driven just by what's on the network news. I think in the end they're going to look at all the candidates and make a decision based on what are they going to do in the future, what kind of solutions do they have, combined with what kind of record do they have. I think now more than ever, when we look at our place in the world, when we look at the challenges we face here in America and around the world, the last thing we need is someone who's not been tested. We saw what happened back in 2008 when we put someone in who's never led anything, particularly at the government level, never led anything, period. We saw what a horrible mistake that was for America. And my hope is that people say, yeah, it's interesting to hear these other people make these points. There's a lot of things that people say that they agree with. But in the end, I still think voters are going to come home and say, I want someone who's proven. And that's where we make our appeal. You want someone who fights, who wins, who actually gets results, and does it without compromising common sense, conservative principles. I'm still the candidate out there.
Governor, I don't think people, as time goes on, give you enough credit for what you actually did with these public sector unions, with these teacher unions. I mean, I was a school board member when I was a young man many years ago in Pennsylvania, and they were running circles around our school system, and we couldn't get anything done with these contracts and everything else. It would never, ever have occurred to me that I would have had a governor who would take these people on, not just take them on, but beat them as they tried to defeat you 3 different times and you beat them. I just think I don't think you're tooting your horn if you remind people of this, because this is a massive accomplishment.
Well, you're right. We did what we said we were going to do, and then we did other things too. We took on the unions. We won. You're right about the power. If people want to take power from Washington and get it out of Washington, I want to send it back to the state. That's what we did with our reforms. We took power out of the hands of the big government special interests and put it firmly in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers and the people they duly elect, so that school boards, county boards, village boards, city councils, the people you elect as taxpayers to run them now can run them, not the big government union bosses who'd run them in the past and still run them, sadly, in other places around this country. But along the way, we did all that. We balanced the $3.6 billion budget deficit. We cut taxes by billions of dollars. In fact, in my state, property taxes, because of our reforms, are actually lower today than they were 4 years ago. But we did other things. I mean, I love all the people who are putting attention on how horrible Planned Parenthood is. I agree. That's why 4 years ago, long before these videos, we defunded Planned Parenthood in my state, and we didn't have the benefit of these videos to make the case. And we just did it because it was Planned Parenthood is not a place that we should be spending government money. And we did that. We did castle doctrine, concealed carry, photo ID. If people want to know, they're frustrated with Washington, which I share that frustration, but they want to know who amongst all these great candidates is going to do more than talk, who's going to actually get things done. That's the strength we bring to the table. We have done it in a blue state. A lot of good people out there, many of whom have done it in red states or purple states. We did it in a blue state, which I hope people can see means if I say I'm going to do it as president, we're going to get it done just like we did in Wisconsin.
Let me hit a couple more issues as quickly as we can. Jeb Bush says to build a wall on the southern border will be $800 to $900 billion. Now, I've gone through this. The Israelis spent almost $500 million, and a wonderful article, Conservative Review, Daniel Horowitz, he extrapolates it out. He also extrapolates out what we did in 14 miles outside of San Diego. I don't know where Jeb Bush is getting $800 to $900 billion, but to build an effective 700 miles, that's what they were supposed to do in 2006. With double fencing, triple fencing in some areas and so forth, it's under $10 billion. Do you know where Jeb Bush gets this figure from, and are you committed to doing this?
I don't know where he gets the number from. I'm absolutely committed to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it tomorrow, because I think part of when we talk about national security, it's not just about the military, although obviously that's a key and important part of it. It's about literally securing our borders. If we were facing the kind of international criminal organizations that we see today penetrating our southern-based borders with drugs, with firearms, with people and human trafficking, and increasingly concerns about ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other forms of radical Islamic terrorism coming across our land-based borders. If that was happening in our water ports, we'd be sending in the Coast Guard, if not the Navy. So it is just a fundamental responsibility of the federal government, who's involved in way too many things in our life, but securing our homeland should be one of the things they should be doing and doing well. So absolutely we should secure the border. And I'm with you on this, that I saw the fencing. I went through it, observed it, saw it up close last time when I was in Israel. If a country the size of Israel can put up something like 500 miles of fence, there's no reason why America, as big and as great as we are, can't do that and shouldn't make it a priority. I would.
And Governor, they're keeping out terrorists. I mean, and it works.
Tremendous success. They pointed out to me the success rates were unbelievable in the areas they've added, and they didn't just put the fence up. They have the personnel and the technology to make sure that it's effective. That, to me, would be the key. It's not just the infrastructure itself. It's making sure you have it staffed properly. It's making sure you have the technology to make sure that people aren't trying to get over or under it. Those are all important things. I had a reporter ask me when I pointed this out, one of these national media reporters saying, well, the number of people going across the border is down. What level do you find to be sufficient? And my response back was to ask that reporter a question back in return and say, when you go through TSA to have your bag screened to make sure there's no explosive devices on before you get on the plane, what percentage of success do you find to be acceptable? Mm-hmm. I think for most of us, we'd say, we want 100% certainty that there's no explosives on the plane. That's the whole reason why you have TSA. The same reason, to me, I think our ultimate goal should have to be absolute success in terms of making sure our border's secure.
Now, I only have 2 minutes left. Governors had a choice to make after Obamacare was passed, because Obamacare loosened the requirements for Medicaid. Millions of more people could get into Medicaid. And while that would be a big boon up front, 100% money from the government, the federal government, over time, we don't know how that's going to be paid. You said, no, I'm not going to do this to my state. Kasich said yes. Christie said yes. Isn't this a big issue?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, I think it's, and you had, to their credit, Rick Perry and Bobby Jindal both said no. They're both in red states. I'm in a blue state. It was incredibly difficult politically, just because I even had some Republicans that said they wanted to grab the money. But I said, hey, it's not free federal money. Federal money is taxpayers' money. We're federal taxpayers. It's not right. Plus, as you mentioned, the federal government has a long history of making promises to state governments and then reneging on them, and I wasn't going to put my taxpayers at that point. Plus, I think Obamacare is a bad idea, and I just knew fundamentally the more states bought into that, the harder it would be to repeal Obamacare, and I wasn't going to be party to that. I think in the end, we need to repeal Obamacare and put patients and families back in charge of their health care decisions.
I've got to go, but to remind us, you're giving this speech on foreign policy at the Citadel in South Carolina. If people want to watch, can they watch it on the web or something like that?
Yep, scottwalker.com. We'll have the link there. If they want to learn more, they can sign right on. They'll be able to see it there. Again, we'll have this, and we'll have many more in the future. We're going to talk about taxes and changing labor union. Much as we took on the challenges, we're going to take on some of those nationally. We've got a lot of other great reforms on the horizon, and I think that's the key to being successful is lay out your ideas, lay out your solutions, big, bold, just like we were in Wisconsin. It wasn't too late there. It's not too late for America.
All right, be safe. Governor Scott Walker, we appreciate it. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
All right, take care.